Charlie Kirk's funeral was always destined to draw national attention, but no one could have anticipated what unfolded within the ceremony. As mourners gathered in reverent silence and cameras captured every detail, one profoundly personal moment emerged, an act of raw grief and devotion that would soon grip the hearts of millions. It was not a speech or a political statement, but a quiet, human gesture, one that, in hindsight, proved more powerful and unforgettable than anyone could have imagined. The setting itself was both intimate and monumental. The service took place in Arizona, where Charlie's body had been flown home aboard Air Force Two, a testament to the breadth of his influence. From the moment the flag-draped casket was carried into the hall, the gravity of the occasion was palpable. The space was hushed, bathed in soft light and adorned with floral arrangements, the air filled only with the murmur of prayers. Friends, family, and supporters sat alongside national figures, including Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha. Yet, despite the presence of dignitaries, the mood was neither political nor ceremonial. It was solemn, raw, and deeply personal. Outside, flags across the nation flew at half-staff in Charlie's honor, mirroring the collective grief that had swept the country. Inside, Charlie's wife, Erica, and their children sat close to the casket, surrounded by loved ones. Their presence served as a poignant reminder that this was not merely the loss of a political activist or media personality, but of a husband and father whose life had been tragically cut short. Every detail of the procession carried symbolic weight: the slow, measured steps of the pallbearers, the meticulously folded flag, the profound silence that enveloped the room, all underscored the finality of the moment. This was a service that bore the gravity of a national loss while preserving the intimacy of a family's farewell. The atmosphere set the stage for what was to come. Attendees expected solemnity, but few could have prepared for the deeply personal and unforgettable tribute Erica Kirk would deliver. When Erica entered the hall, the room seemed to hold its breath. Dressed in black, she moved slowly toward the flag-draped casket at the center of the room. For days, she had remained largely out of the public eye, sharing only brief, heart-wrenching messages online. Now, before family, friends, and national leaders, she made her first deeply personal gesture of mourning. As she reached the casket, she paused. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, her hands trembling before finally resting gently on the polished wood. That single, silent movement carried a weight no words could convey. Observers described the silence as almost unbearable. Every eye was fixed on her. She leaned forward, her shoulders visibly collapsing under the weight of her grief. It wasn't the cameras or the dignitaries that defined the moment, it was the quiet, devastating reality of a wife standing over her husband's coffin. Unlike the scripted tributes delivered from the podium, this was unfiltered sorrow laid bare. Photographs later released captured the intimacy of that moment. Erica pressed against the casket, her hand resting firmly as if clinging to the last physical connection she had left. For many who saw the images, it was the first time the accurate scale of the loss truly sank in. Beyond politics, beyond headlines, this was the human cost of assassination. Her first appearance at the casket became the emotional epicenter of the day. It was not staged or rehearsed. It was a spontaneous, natural expression of grief that no one who witnessed it could ever forget. And it was only the beginning of Erica's tribute, a tribute that would soon leave an indelible mark on the nation. The most haunting moment came when Erica leaned over the open casket and reached for her husband's hand. Cameras captured it, and within hours, the images were everywhere. But in the room, it was more than a photograph. It was a raw, visceral act of love and loss that left the entire audience in stunned, reverent silence. She clasped Charlie's hand gently at first, then more firmly, as if unwilling or unable to let go. Her tears fell freely as she rested her head close to him. The sight of her holding his still, lifeless hand was almost too painful to witness. For those in attendance, it was the moment the full enormity of the tragedy revealed itself. Later, videos and photographs of that instant spread like wildfire, showing Erica kissing his hand and pressing her face against it. Viewers described it as heart-stopping because it shattered the formality of the ceremony, exposing grief in its most primal, unvarnished form. This was not just a widow saying goodbye to her husband. It was a woman clinging desperately to the last tangible remnant of the man she loved. What made the moment so profoundly influential was its simplicity. No words, no speeches. Just a hand held between the living and the dead, a final, desperate act of love. It resonated with millions who saw the images, even those who had never agreed with Charlie's politics. They felt the universal, human weight of that gesture. That single act became the defining image of the funeral. More than the presence of leaders or the rituals of state, it was Erica's hand clasped around Charlie's that people remembered. It was the symbol of a bond unbroken even by death. When the images and video of Erica holding her husband's hand began circulating, the public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the photos graced front pages and dominated news feeds worldwide. What struck people most was not the dignitaries or the formalities, but the raw humanity of a grieving wife clinging to her husband one last time. For Charlie's supporters, the moment became a rallying cry. They hailed it as the most powerful statement of the entire funeral, a demonstration of love and loyalty that eclipsed any speech. Many shared the images with prayers and vows to carry on his mission, framing Erica's tribute as a symbol of unwavering resilience. However, the response extended beyond his political base. Even those who had opposed Charlie's views acknowledged the profound weight of Erica's gesture. Commentators and ordinary citizens alike admitted her grief transcended politics. For a fleeting moment, divisions seemed to dissolve, replaced by a shared empathy for a young widow and her fatherless children. Faith communities also amplified the tribute. Churches shared the images in sermons and social media posts, interpreting her act as a testament to love enduring beyond the grave. Prayer gatherings across the country referenced Erica's moment at the casket, finding it both heartbreaking and profoundly inspiring. News coverage reflected this shift. Anchors spoke less about policy and more about family, less about politics, and more about the devastating human cost of violence. The gesture became the defining image of the tragedy, a single, silent act that captured what words never could. The public's reaction proved that sometimes, the quietest, most unplanned moments resonate more deeply than any grand speech or ceremonial display. Erica's tribute became that moment, a symbol of grief the nation could not ignore. While Erica's silent moments at the casket became the most unforgettable images, her spoken words carried equal power. When she finally addressed the gathered crowd, her voice was heavy with emotion yet steady with conviction. She said not as the wife of a public figure, but as a woman who had lost the love of her life and the father of her children. She described Charlie as a man who lived with unwavering purpose, carrying his convictions into every facet of his life, whether on a national stage or within the quiet walls of his home. She called him a devoted husband, a fiercely protective father, and someone who believed his mission was greater than himself. Her words painted a vivid portrait of the man behind the headlines, not just a national figure, but the very heart of their family. The moment that touched listeners most deeply came when Erica revealed what she had told their young daughter. To shield her from the crushing pain of loss, she explained that her father was away on a work trip with Jesus. The simplicity and heartbreaking tenderness of that phrase stunned the audience. It was the kind of explanation only a mother, desperate to comfort her child, could offer. Erica's remarks moved beyond grief. She vowed that Charlie's voice would not be silenced, promising to raise their children according to the same values he championed. She urged the audience to find strength not in anger, but in faith. In those words, she transformed profound mourning into steely determination, making it unequivocally clear that her husband's death would not mark the end of his mission. Her tribute, both tender and defiant, was the emotional core of the service. It reminded everyone that while Charlie Kirk's life was tragically cut short, his influence would endure through his family, his faith, and the movement he inspired. Faith shaped nearly every aspect of Charlie Kirk's funeral. From the opening prayers to the closing hymns, the service reflected the deep Christian convictions that he and Erica had built their lives upon. Scripture was read not as mere ritual, but as a vital source of strength for a grieving family and a community struggling to come to terms with a shocking loss. Psalm 46 verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, echoed throughout the ceremony. The verse carried special significance, as it was the same passage Erica had shared on social media just hours before her husband's assassination. Hearing it again at the funeral felt like a circle closing, as if their faith had been quietly preparing them for the storm to come. Hymns filled the hall, sung not only by the choir but softly, tearfully, by many in the audience. For some, the music was an act of worship, for others, a vessel for grief. Together, the prayers and songs created a sacred space where sorrow and hope coexisted. Erica's own words were steeped in that same faith. She reminded mourners that Charlie's work was never solely about politics, but about a larger, divinely rooted mission. She confided that the only way she could stand at his casket and speak was because she trusted in God's plan, even amidst unspeakable tragedy. This faith-centered atmosphere gave the funeral a tone distinct from a political rally or public memorial. It was intimate, personal, and unshakably spiritual. For those in the room and those watching from afar, the message was clear: grief may endure, but faith would carry the Kirk family forward. Charlie Kirk's funeral carried the weight of a profound personal tragedy, yet it also reflected the national impact of his life and sudden death. Among the mourners were political leaders and public figures who came to pay their respects, standing quietly alongside family, friends, and supporters. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha, were among the most visible attendees. They accompanied the casket on its flight to Arizona aboard Air Force Two, a gesture underscoring how closely Charlie had been tied to the highest echelons of political influence. Military personnel, serving as pallbearers, carried the flag-draped coffin, adding to the sense that this was not merely a private farewell, but an event of national significance. Though former President Donald Trump was not present in person, he had already honored Charlie by ordering flags across the country to be lowered to half-staff. Messages of condolence poured in from governors, members of Congress, and international allies who had followed Charlie's career. Their tributes framed him not just as a controversial figure but as a voice that helped shape the political conversation of a generation. Yet, inside the hall, the presence of dignitaries never overshadowed the grieving family. The tone remained intensely personal, centered entirely on Erica and her children. The officials who attended did so not to dominate the service, but to quietly acknowledge the magnitude of the loss. This unique blend of personal mourning and national recognition made the funeral extraordinary. It was both a family's intimate farewell and a symbolic moment for a movement. The sight of national leaders bowing their heads in silence while Erica wept over her husband's casket reminded everyone that this tragedy reached far beyond politics. It touched the soul of the nation. Amid the solemnity of the service, the presence of Charlie and Erica Kirk's two young children was perhaps the most heartbreaking sight of all. Too young to fully comprehend the weight of the moment, they stayed close to their mother, sometimes cradled in her arms, sometimes seated quietly beside relatives. Their innocent faces, set against the sea of adult grief, brought home the human cost of the assassination more powerfully than any eulogy ever could. During her remarks, Erica spoke directly about them, revealing again how she had told their daughter that her father was on a work trip with Jesus. That simple, heart-wrenching phrase rippled through the audience and later across the nation, becoming one of the most memorable lines of the entire funeral. The children's presence also symbolized continuity. As Erica stood at the casket and vowed that Charlie's mission would not be silenced, it was clear she saw her children as the living legacy of his values. They may not yet understand what has happened, but they will grow up immersed in the principles their father preached and lived by, carried forward by their mother's unwavering determination. For many in attendance, seeing the children was the most painful part of the service. It stripped away all politics, leaving only the stark, devastating reality of a family forever changed. Their quiet presence beside the casket served as a constant, silent reminder, beyond the headlines and the debates. This was a father stolen from his home, and two young lives irrevocably altered. In our digital age, where moments are captured and shared instantly, it was the visuals, not the speeches, that carried Charlie Kirk's story across the world. One image, in particular, became iconic: Erica leaning over the open casket, tenderly holding her husband's hand. Photographers captured her tears falling onto his still fingers, her face pressed close as if refusing to let go. That single frame became the defining symbol of the day, replayed on news broadcasts and shared millions of times online. Other images added depth to the narrative: the flag-draped casket borne by pallbearers, the moment the coffin arrived in Arizona aboard Air Force Two, with Erica walking solemnly beside Vice President Vance and his wife, the children seated quietly in the front row, their small forms magnifying the enormity of the loss. Each photograph told a part of the story, and together, they created a portrait of grief and resilience that no article or commentary could match. Erica herself amplified these visuals by posting a series of 12 photos on Instagram, images showing her clinging to the casket, praying, and weeping. Her caption, "They have no idea what they just ignited within this wife," transformed her personal grief into a public statement of defiance. For supporters, it was both shattering and inspiring. These visuals stunned the nation because they were utterly unfiltered. They showed the agony of a family caught in the jaws of tragedy, the humanity of a woman who had lost her soulmate, and the irreversible finality of a moment that could never be undone. These images will likely endure as the lasting memory of Charlie Kirk's farewell, a legacy sealed in grief and immortalized by tribute. Charlie Kirk's funeral was filled with symbols, rituals, and speeches. But when the final hymn faded and the last mourner departed, one truth stood above all else. His legacy was ultimately sealed not by his public work, but through the profound grief and unwavering tribute of his wife. Erica's presence at the casket, holding his hand, speaking of faith, vowing to carry his mission forward, became the emotional heart of the service and the image that will echo through history. Her actions reminded the nation that Charlie's life was about more than rallies and debates. It was about the family he left behind. The children by her side, the faith woven into her every word, and the rawness of her grief transformed the service into something far greater than a political farewell. It became a universal human story, one that resonated even with those who had disagreed with him during his lifetime. Erica's vow that his voice would never be forgotten struck many as both deeply personal and powerfully public. For supporters, it was a reassurance that the movement he built would endure. For others, it was a testament to the fierce determination born of love and loss. In this way, her tribute ensured that Kirk's legacy would be tied not only to his work but to the enduring, unbreakable bond of his family. The images from that day will likely outlast the details of investigations, the political debates, and the daily headlines. They captured a widow's grief, a mother's strength, and a family's sorrow, elements that transform a political figure into something timeless. In the end, Charlie Kirk's story now lives in two distinct, yet inseparable, parts: the public mission he carried in life, and the stunning, soul-stirring tribute his wife delivered at his farewell. Together, they form a legacy that will not easily fade.